Alrighty, welcome to episode, whatever comes after the last one about live stream hardware. So, this is the system, and I got to show before piecing it together, and lo and behold, it did get through Holy Week, I think, really nicely. You can see we have our USB audio interface, and then up here, we have our 3 video encoders that I showed before. So during the duration of COVID, this live stream was kind of slapped together and there were literally cables running all over the place. But the hope is that moving forward is that all of this new system, which is really powerful and has been working beautifully, that we'll be able to integrate it into the parish. So we'll be able to continue being able to do what we have been doing, which has been super beneficial. So I wanted to show you, in the last video on live stream hardware, I was able to show these different pieces. Since then, just had a couple little updates. So instead of just a single input into our audio interface, right now we have stereo going on. So we actually have stereo audio going into our live stream. And the way that happened was it was just as simple as routing an additional XLR 100-foot cable from the music area to this mixer up here. And then I was able to pan the one left and pan the other one right. The other update is that now we have access to all of the audio from the presiders, lavaliers, and from the ambo and the altar as well. And so what that looked like was just working with the company to get a single output from the church biamp mixer into this unit over here. So now all of it is super integrated and much simpler as opposed to using all 8 channels here and not having access to all of the audio that we need to. Now all of that is neatly contained in this channel 6. And then it's only 3 knobs, 3 volume knobs to adjust as opposed to 8, which is really nice. And then, yep, that goes into these 2 1/4-inch cables here into the USB Scarlett interface and then into the computer. The other thing that I'm hoping to update today and super excited to show you, I've never used one before, but super excited to try, is what we've been using up to this point are these 50-foot HDMI cords. You can see that when we're dealing with that length, apparently they're directional. So the receiving end needs to go in a certain direction. So you just got to make sure that they're on the right side. Now, moving forward, since we're hoping to continue using this, these cables are currently just on the floor, covered up by rugs leading into the church. Now that can't necessarily continue moving forward once we actually start bringing people into the church. So I'm going to be replacing these cables with a Cat6 HDMI transmission system. And the advantage of that, supposedly, is that your range is a lot longer. So the ones we'll be showing in a second should be about 160 to 200 foot range. And that's going to be super helpful because what we're trying to do in this case is run it into the newly drilled holes in the sacristy floor and then neatly run it underground to a different area of church where it will be able to be a more permanent situation and not noticeable at all. So it makes me a little bit nervous taking out what I affectionately call EWGN, Eternal Word Gregory Network, but maybe it should be called TWGN, Temporary Word Gregory Network. Anyway, this has been working really nicely. The screws which mount this to the rack, it's a little bit interesting. It's not like your typical audio rack screws. These were special, I suppose, data server rack screws, and so they were a little bit different diameter. So I didn't have those on hand, so I'm gonna try to make sure I don't lose those 4. But what we're gonna be doing is, instead of connecting directly to these video encoders via HDMI, via a single HDMI cord like we had, we're gonna be introducing kind of an intermediate stage. So it's adding just one more thing that needs to work perfectly in order for this to happen. That's the funny thing with YouTube Live and some of these systems is there are literally 100 things that need to work at once flawlessly. Well, here we go. We're gonna dig into it. So kind of building this, you can see that it looks like Swiss cheese. I didn't exactly know where I was drilling, but that's okay. Maybe I won't need to drill now since I already have it. So what we're going to be introducing is, I actually have two different companies. So they came in two different packages. Lost the one package, got COVID to thank for that. I suppose shipping is a little bit interesting. So we've got this one J-Tech, and it'll be cool because I'll get to test different types and see which one works best, or hopefully both will work well. J-Tech, and if we open that up, here we are. That's what these look like. So I know that for me, the first time I saw these, I had no idea what was going on. I was like, what is this and what does it do? Why do we need it? Well, what this does is, instead of an HDMI cord, so like this one for instance is 6 feet. This becomes your HDMI cord and you can extend it 160 feet. They make some that'll go 500 feet. The benefit of these is supposed to be that they are super reliable over long distances that you can't do with just a regular standard HDMI cord. At best, with your even a fiber optic HDMI cord, you might be able to get 50 or 100 feet. It's possible. But when you're dealing with a longer range, you might need to go with something like this. Similarly, is you can do different types of Cat6 transmission. For example, you can also transmit USB signals via Cat6, and it's going to look very, very similar to this. The difference being, instead of having an HDMI, a single HDMI output on your receiving end, you might have one or even 1, 2, 3 USB ports available, which definitely could have a benefit. I've been helping St. Mary of the Angels with some of their YouTube live stream, and everything worked perfectly except for the USB extenders. So I thought about the possibility of purchasing a 100-foot cable, and along the way of this 100-foot USB cable, it has signal amplifiers, and then on the receiving end, it actually has I think it's either 5 or 12 volt. Must be a 12 volt power cable. It actually needs to be powered, and then you plug it into an AC outlet. Now the problem with that was when you have a webcam on the other side, as opposed to something like this. So using a webcam instead of a camera, that 100-foot cable, USB cable, was glitching. You would see the video pop in and out. So I don't think that is the way to go. Trying to extend a USB signal with a long USB cable might not exactly work. I think for that situation, you can extend your USB signal via Cat6. And that's what's going on here, is that a Cat6 cable or a Cat5 cable, I think, I heard something about being able to downgrade. So if you have a Cat6, a Cat5 system will work on a Cat6 cable. I need to look a little bit more into that, but there's something along those lines. But this is a 100-foot Cat6 cable, so that I'll be able to plug in just a very short HDMI cable, Cat6, going from one end to the other end over here, and then these actually will communicate with each other. There are different types of systems like this. So this one is just individual. So this one, let's see. This is the receiver, this is the transmitter. So our camera is going to be plugged into this transmitter, and then what it's going to do is decode the signal into some sort of Cat6 format and then it's going to communicate with this one. If you wanted to, let's say, split the signal so that you could have multiple receivers, like you might have multiple TVs you're trying to transmit a signal to, the same signal to, and a projection system, well, you can't necessarily just put a Cat6 splitter or an Ethernet cord splitter in between and expect that they'll be able to still communicate. You have to get a special system that has one transmitter and multiple, I've seen 4, and I'm sure you could get ones with 8 receivers. So that's my best guess on how these work. I still have a little bit to learn, but that's that's what I know so far. Well, what I'm hoping to do now is to be able to add this one. This one's a JTEC, and then I have another one here, which has no company name, at least that I can see. User manual. It's probably made in China, but who needs user manuals? We're gonna figure it out. So it looks very similar. Same. So this one says RX, this one says TX. That's just short for RX is receiver, TX is a transmitter. So it's about the same size. It says it can transmit 1080p or even 3D apparently. That should do the trick. So I'm gonna see if I can mount these, and then, so I'll be back in a little bit after that's done. There's nothing a little zip tie work can't solve. You can see I've got my little stash over here. So I'm really gonna just try to make this as compact as possible. It's so much fun. It's kind of amazing how dusty this got after just like a little over 2 months. But look at all this room we got now. Instead of just laying these down flat one by one, just stacked 3 together, and we potentially have room for like 3 more cameras. That's actually like super exciting. So honestly, the more foresight you have with putting these systems together, the better. But I really only need the tiniest little HDMI cable to connect from these Cat6 HDMI transmitters to the video encoders. But I got a 5-pack of 6-footers. So here's the best I could do for the moment. You can see it would have been a lot easier with a 6-inch HDMI cable just to get from here to here, but for the time being, TWGN. So I think the next step is to actually install this unit here inside the rack and then connect it via Ethernet cable. But I'm also super grateful to a couple who during this COVID time, they actually had their wedding anyway, regardless. And what they did was, I was super impressed. They set up a YouTube live stream. And when he mentioned that and the fact that he did it successfully, that is really quite the accomplishment, because since when do you just like set this stuff up? Anyway, what he ended up having to do was, he was originally gonna go over a Wi-Fi connection, but very quickly realized, or a hotspot, and very quickly realized that that wasn't gonna work out. So he proceeded to, with only 5 days leading up to the wedding or so, get a long Ethernet cable so that he could connect his computer to the rectory. And he actually had an extender going on, so it wasn't just a 100-foot cable like this is, but he also had an extender and an additional 75 feet. So kudos to you, that was really incredible. And thank you for the wire, which you don't need anymore. But it's a really cool thought to think that in a cable like this, you're piping through about like 70 people over live stream. Just imagine all the little people going through. So actually, just got this unit back installed over here with all the different pieces. It's up there, you can see everything is stacked. From the front, it actually doesn't look so bad. Everything is fairly nice. Now if you looked at the back, it almost makes you want to cry, all the wires that are going all over the place. But I have hope, because, you know, at one point, that's what the church looked like. And right now, doing this over here with just revising this setup, now there's gonna be less cables, and I'll be able to get rid of an entire mat that's in the hallway right now. So, whereas before there was a mess of cables outside in the church, now there's a mess of cables here, and I've hoped that in the future, this itself will also be revised, updated, and cleaned up. So, yeah, a continual work in progress. It's just continually moving where all the cables are. So all that's left right now is to attach the Cat6 cables, you know, the 100-footers, to run them, to plug them into these receivers, and then to run them through the hole in the sacristy down to a different section of the church. Alrighty, so I'm here just about almost a week later actually, since trying to install all of this stuff. It didn't quite work right away, and that happened for a couple of reasons. One thing I was wrong about is that there isn't a two-way communication between the transmitter and the receiver. I actually plugged in the one transmitter from one company to the receiver of another company, and it actually worked. Now, it didn't work right away, as I found out, because one of my cables was bad. And so before you actually install everything and route your wires, especially if you have to go into all sorts of different places, check your cables, if that's just one simple piece of advice. Other than that, just make sure you connect everything correctly. You know, keep track of which cable goes where, you know, keep your companies the same. Simple stuff like that, but it really didn't work until I made sure all of that was done properly. So other than that, it's working beautifully right now. The quality is super crisp, super sharp. The colors are right where they need to be. They look like they came straight out of the camera. So super excited now that we don't have cables lying all over the church. Everything looks kind of back to normal. There's just one little corner of the church which wasn't being used, and that's kind of where the new cable is being routed to and able to do all of the wireless video. So yeah, so far so good.